Hello again, I am Blunty. So, you've seen the headlines, right? It'll be everywhere by now, I'm sure. Let's have a chat. Nintendo Switch emulator Yuzu to shut down. Pay $2.4 million to settle lawsuit from Nintendo. Yuzu, as I expect I won't have to explain to many viewers here, is a free and open source emulator for Nintendo Switch software. There are versions for Windows and Android devices. It has been under constant active development since 2018, and just a week ago it was reported that Nintendo were suing the developers under a claim that the primary purpose of the software was to circumvent Nintendo Switch encryptions and, of course, piracy. Now, only an idiot would make a claim that the majority, or at least a large portion of Yuzu users were pirating their games, but Yuzu don't actively condone or support or promote this, of course, and it's been reverse engineered, so no actual Nintendo code exists in the distributed form of Yuzu. You do, though, have to have some Nintendo-specific encryption keys to make it work properly, but these can be obtained by legal owners of Nintendo Switch hardware, as I did from my own Nintendo Switch legally purchased full price, well, one of 3 that I own, actually. But that's not something Yuzu provide or distribute. The short version is, if this actually went to court properly, under the claims Nintendo are making, I honestly wonder if Nintendo would win. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter, because rather than fight the case in an endlessly drawn-out court case, Tropic Haze, the developers, instead agreed to an out-of-court settlement, agreeing to $2.4 million in damages to Nintendo and to stop distributing or promoting Yuzu, deleting all their files about it and promising never to do anything like it ever again. It's Nintendo's attempt to send a chilling effect into the emulation space, to make anyone else just too scared to make an emulator. Oh, they tried to make an emulator, and look what happened to them, $2.4 million. But importantly, it is not a legal precedent because it was settled out of court. It was just an agreement. And Nintendo never, ever intended it to be an actual court case. Their goal was always to settle out of court because that's what they always do. Almost always, but we'll get to that. But they do this because they know they might not win. And the worst thing Nintendo fear about this stuff is having a legal precedent set against them, enshrining into a fully legal judgment that can be referred to that emulators that do not otherwise infringe on copyright or distribute proprietary code are in fact judged legally to be legal. Which, in the eyes of most people, I think they would be considered to be, even if they can be used to do illegal things, like piracy. Cars can be used to do illegal things, like speeding and manslaughter, but no one's talking to Ford and taking them to court about it, are they? And that's the argument here. Tropic Haze were not distributing copyrighted games, nor the encryption keys, nor the Switch system files or firmware or anything like that, so they say, or have said until this point, they shouldn't and can't be held responsible for the fact that other people do that. Not any more than Ford can be held responsible for speeding tickets, even though their cars are designed to be able to exceed the maximum legal speed limit. Because that would be foolish. They'd be laughed out of court. So let's now have a look at Nintendo.com.au's own legal page. You'll find these paragraphs on the matter of ROMs. Although Australian copyright law now allows limited format shifting for certain copyright material for private and domestic use, this right does not allow the copying of Nintendo games to a different format. We'll come back to that. Also, the limited right which the Copyright Act gives to make backup copies of computer programs does not apply to Nintendo video games. What? I'm sorry, what? Nintendo.com.au's legal page does not apply to Nintendo video games? Does not apply to Nintendo games specifically? Horse crap! I've read that law. I'll put it on screen for you right now. You can read it too. Look at that. Can you see the word Nintendo anywhere there in this portion of the Copyright Act which deals specifically with backups of computer programs, including games? Look hard. Keep looking. You see Nintendo anywhere there? I don't. I searched the entire document this morning. Nintendo were never mentioned once. So why are your games, Nintendo, magically exempt from the law in Australia? Answer, they're not. But here's the larger problem with all of this. Beyond the lie about their games being magically separate from everyone else's games when it comes to the law as written, it's a lie anyway. Or at least a half-truth, while Nintendo's own interpretation of that law is, as stated on their legal page, other people interpret it very differently, and it has, to my knowledge, never once actually been tested in a court of law. In fact, Nintendo and all the other copyright holders have never tested this in an Australian court of law, because they don't want the legal precedent to sign against them. And Nintendo specifically have gone to great efforts to make sure that a legal precedent is never set for this with an official court ruling, because they are not sure it's right. They are not convinced they'd win. They know that their games aren't magically exempt from the law just because they say so. And they are scared, they are terrified, horrified of actually having a case run to completion and being ruled against in this law. Our legally protected right to format shift and back up our media, which we have purchased. Which is why you so often, in fact every single time, see cases Nintendo bring against all matter of emulator-related stuff being settled out of court. And they can get away with this because they pick their targets really carefully, and because they are so massive, basically no one could even afford to stand against them in court. They can just outlast them with money. All Nintendo has to do is outspend the accused legals team, something they're more than happy and capable of doing, to make sure a verdict is never ever passed and a precedent is never ever set. They just outlast them and bully them until there's no other option but to either have your life ruined forever or settle out of court. It's bullying, and actions like that should be against the law, in my opinion. If I ruled the world, that kind of behavior would be against the law. Under my system, money would play no part in the legal system. Everyone would get equal representation, and if you wanted to take someone to court for something, money would play no part. It would be right against wrong, as judged by the legal system and juries and all of that kind of stuff. And beyond that option, I would love to live in a world where a mythical moral billionaire, something that literally can't exist under the standards of which capitalism works. There is no such thing as a good billionaire, just by nature of the system. But imagine there was a moral billionaire fully funded a court case against Nintendo on issues like this to finally and once and for all set an actual legal precedent to hold everybody to. No more of this grey area crap. Just get it sorted, you cowards. But no, Nintendo are petrified of actual justice. Back in 2010, it was largely reported that a so-called legal victory against a tiny retailer in Australia selling R4 carts. If you don't know what R4 carts are, they were little carts you could load Nintendo 3DS ROMs onto and play them on official Nintendo 3DS hardware. And you see what I mean about Nintendo really carefully picking soft targets to bully against so they can win. They took a two-person retailer selling R4 carts to court. They were targeted by Nintendo because they were a soft target. And the result of this was it was largely reported wrongly and erroneously as setting a precedent for banning R4 carts in Australia. No, they weren't. They weren't banned. It did no such thing. It was settled out of court. There was no legal precedent set. Why? Well, because Nintendo had unlimited legal funds to throw against these two blokes to make sure that any attempt to stand their ground would ruin their entire lives. So they had no option but to settle out of court just to get it done with. It was not worth fighting that Goliath. There was no way to outlast them in the legal system as it stands. But the R4 carts weren't banned. There was no legal precedent set. What Nintendo did do was make everyone else too scared to stock them, just in case Nintendo decided to come after them too, and they too would have to settle out of court for $520,000 like these guys did. The only thing this case nailed down was an agreement that banned these two people from distributing R4 carts and paying Nintendo $520,000, a catastrophically large amount for two small businessmen, but ultimately a comparatively tiny amount of cash versus the legal fees of actually seeing the case to its conclusion for an actual legal ruling. And a reminder, under Australia's copyright law, they theoretically might have actually won under the format shifting provisions for pirate use, because the R4 cards don't actually do the copying of the ROMs, and all these people were doing was selling the R4 cards. They weren't manufacturing them, they weren't preparing them with preloaded ROMs, as some other sites did. But those sites didn't exist in Australia, so Nintendo Australia couldn't go after them. And the regions that were selling them preloaded with stuff were things like China, whose copyright laws are gestural at best. The only thing these two businessmen did was import a device you could load ROMs onto and sell it to people. There is actually nothing illegal about that, despite what Nintendo says. But these are grey areas. There are dozens of other examples, dozens upon dozens upon dozens of examples of Nintendo doing this kind of crap, and each and every one of them was settled out of court to avoid setting legal precedents. Cowards, bullies, and scumbags. The only court cases Nintendo actually let run to completion to a legal verdict are things like suing websites that actually distribute ROMs, which is a much clearer defined thing as far as the law is concerned. And of course, perhaps most famously, a man called Bowser, who became a scapegoat and sacrificial lamb all in one when it came to hacking the Switch, which, while Nintendo framed it as a piracy, was actually a legal case of making devices to circumvent certain kinds of copyright protection, which is a very different animal legally speaking. But Nintendo don't care, so long as they can spin it in the press to put enough fear into people, uncertainty, doubt, to make people too scared to do legal things, just in case Nintendo's legal team come after them with their enormous wallets. It is not about morality, it's not even about legality. It's about being a bully so large and so funded it becomes impossible to challenge them. Nintendo are cowards, like all bullies are. This whole thing has really annoyed me. I don't blame the devs for settling out of court. Literally, what other option did they have at this point? Like I've been talking about, they couldn't possibly outlast Nintendo's legal team. They had no other option but to fold in half. It is a broken system. This, and it infuriates me. Like, you've no idea how much I've been holding back in this video alone. Like, if I told you what I really think, I couldn't monetize this video. And I really need the cash. Speaking of which, thank you to the patrons. Thank you very much for the small amount of cash that comes in from that. Very much appreciated. To everyone else, thank you for making it to the end of the video, I suppose. Catch you next time.